joining us for the latest installment of the Institute of the Americas Energy webinar series. This is Jeremy Martin, Vice President of Energy and Sustainability, coming to you live from our home here in La Jolla, and I hope it's as delightful in everywhere else in the world where you're joining us from today as the weather is here. We are getting Chamber of Commerce weather. We're very happy for this latest installment of our webinar series to continue discussions of a topic that the Institute has been involved with on a couple different levels for many years. And I'm referring to the Central American electric market, but also the role of diversification of the energy matrix in countries of Central America. In this case today we'll talk about El Salvador, and specifically the role of natural gas. And for several years, and even recently at our roundtable in Panama at the end of September, the topic of the role for natural gas in the economies and the energy sector of Central America has been something of increasing importance. But it's always been a discussion at a fairly high level, and I would suggest an almost abstract. However, with the development of the AES terminal in Panama that's coming online in the next year or so, as well as the Energía del Pacifico project in El Salvador, we now are going to see what the IDB recommended several years ago in terms of a LNG terminal to land natural gas in the markets of northern Central America and an LNG terminal to land natural gas in the markets and economies of the other countries in the sort of southern tier of Central America. So we are witnessing the actual development and every day moving closer to the fruition of natural gas arrival into the economies and the energy matrices of Central America. As I mentioned, we did a roundtable and had an extensive discussion of the coming gas into the market in Panama, particularly what that meant for the Panamanian electric matrix, maybe some alternative uses in industry, in the cement industry, also perhaps in the transport sector, but largely in terms of the power plant that will begin to deliver natural gas power generation into the Panamanian market. Today we'll talk about Energía del Pacifico and that project that's under development in El Salvador, what that project will mean for the El Salvadoran electric market and more broadly the Salvador economy and the so-called Northern Triangle, the other countries in the northern part of Central America. And we're very pleased to have with us the Executive Director of the Energía del Pacifico project, Alejandro Alle, who I'm sure many of you know and have seen in person, and he's participated in many of the Institute's discussions in Central America. He's held this position as Executive Director of Energía del Pacifico since 2013. Prior to that was the General Manager of Quantum Energy, and as he'll explain to us, Quantum Energy is one of the shareholders of the LNG project in El Salvador. He's been involved in the Central American energy market for almost 20 years, and prior to that was working in energy issues in his home of Argentina. We won't hold that against him, his Argentine nationality. In fact, maybe at the end we'll ask him what he thinks of the Macri administration in terms of energy. But no, joking aside, we're very pleased. Alejandro has joined us as a participant many times in our webinar series, so we're always happy to be able to turn the tables and have one of our regular participants actually present and share insights on either development projects that they're working on. So with that, I'd like to invite Alejandro, who will make a formal presentation of about 30 or 40 minutes. And for those of you who've joined us before, you know the routine, but just in case, we use the chat function to pose questions. Don't hesitate. Anytime during the formal presentation, you can take advantage of the chat function to pose a question, or you can make reference to what's going on in your hometown, as David Lewis has already done. So there's where we do the questions. You don't have to wait to submit the questions, but we will wait to manage the question and answer session at the end of the formal presentation. So with that, I'd like to invite Alejandro Alle to make the formal presentation and share with us the developments at the Energía del Pacifico, and specifically what's going on with the Salvadoran market and more broadly Central America and the Northern Triangle. Alejandro, thanks so much.
Thank you, Jeremy, for this kind presentation, and thanks to the Institute of the Americas for this opportunity. I'm very glad to have this possibility, and thanks everyone for attending this event. Jeremy, I'm not seeing the the presentation? Now, perfect. Thank you very much. Yes, as you mentioned, I'm from Argentina, but many years, 17 years living in El Salvador, and I love very much El Salvador as well. So today, let's talk about Energía del Pacifico. The LNG to power in the Pacific coast of Central America. It's a dream, a project we have started thinking about 5 years ago, more or less. So let's talk about El Salvador on the map, because we are trying to put El Salvador on the LNG map. But for those not too familiar with the Central American map, let's take a look at the map. On the left, you can see northwest Mexico, southeast Colombia, and in the middle, the group of Central American countries. And here is El Salvador, the only country that in Central America that has coast only in the Pacific, because all the other countries have coast in the Atlantic as well. Zooming in a little bit, here is El Salvador, here is San Salvador city where our offices are based, and Acajutla. We will talk a lot about Acajutla, is the site where our project will be built. We will also talk a little bit about the North Triangle of Central America. That is, this part is Guatemala, is Honduras, and El Salvador. That is basically the focus, our focus for future upsides. But today our focus is really on developing our LNG to power project. It all started for a tender, for a PPA, 355 megawatts, called by the government, because although this is a purely private business between Energía del Pacifico, our company, and the 7 of tenders that are distribution companies, we are private. Definitely, as well as it happens all over the world, the electric sector is a highly regulated sector in which the regulator, the state, the government has a big say on the key issues. For instance, to reduce volatility, the government decided that it was going, with good sense, it was going to be important to oblige the distribution companies to be contracted long term, and particularly to try to change the energy matrix and go towards the natural gas. The PPAs are with all the distribution companies for a total of 355 megawatts. It's for 20 years, starting in the commercial operation day that we expect to be in late 2020, as we will see. PPAs are proportionally allocated between the 7 distribution companies, our off-takers. This is key. Those are financial PPAs, because what rules the dispatch is the merit order dispatch. And the contract price has 2 components. One is the variable costs that are passed through, basically fuel costs and variable operation and maintenance, and a concept that is the spread or premium, or it's an amount of dollars per megawatt hours under contract. It's basically to pay the relatively low fixed cost that this kind of project has, plus the investment. Energía del Pacifico is really the special purpose vehicle that was created by the local developer Quantum when was awarded the international tender organized by the government, as mentioned. So initially it was Quantum that, with the support of very important key players, as I will mention, but in advance I will say Shell, Wärtsilä, and IFC, Quantum decided to participate in this tender, and by the tender rules, once awarded, it had to be created the special purpose vehicle, that Energía del Pacifico is the name, we used, and we signed the PPAs already as Energía del Pacifico. Project site, as mentioned, port of Acajutla, and again, it all was under the mandate and supervision in El Salvador is CIGET, Superintendencia General of Electricity and Telecommunications. Sorry. Some words about the two shareholders. I mentioned that it all started with Quantum in the tender, and on the right you can see it's a company incorporated in El Salvador. In the picture is Eduardo Sabla, not only president but also a great leader of Quantum, the guy that led other shareholders to participate in this tender, to believe that it was going to be possible to have an LNG to power project in Central America. And another key player in our project in Energía del Pacifico is Invenergy, the US-based company with headquarters in Chicago, that we selected as a strategic partner and is today majority shareholder. You can see the website, invenergyllc.com, and we want to mention also the great leadership of the company, of his president, Michael Polsky. Together we have the perfect match between the local and the global leaders. Some words about Invenergy. The slogan is clean energy for our future. Today Invenergy owns 85% of property in Energía del Pacifico. And we can see in this slide and in the next slide the total of 16 gigawatts developed, owned, and operated by Invenergy. For instance, more than 10 gigawatts in 80 wind projects, more than 5 gigawatts in 10 natural gas projects. Natural gas is clean energy, no? It's not renewable only, but clean. Solar projects, 12 solar projects for 230 megawatts, and even energy storage, 94 megawatts. Where? Naturally, being a US-based company, you can see on the left the US map, densely populated with projects of Invenergy, as well as in Mexico. But not only, you can see also in Japan, Scotland, Poland, and lately, last 3 years more or less, in Latin America, in South America, 2 very interesting projects in Uruguay, and now in developing very well advanced development in El Salvador. I mentioned 3 key guys that supported us since the beginning. When we started developing this project, we knew that
Alejandro, I think we've lost when you started discussing this slide. Are you there still? Alejandro?
Procurement contract signed a couple of years ago.
Alejandro?
Yes.
We lost you. Your audio disappeared for about 30 seconds. I hate to do this, but we missed the beginning discussion of this slide.
Okay. I will start. Sorry, I will start with this slide again. Can you hear me good now?
Yes.
Well now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yes, I was mentioning that we were surrounded by key guys in the world, Shell, Wärtsilä, and even IFC, of course, but we are not putting IFC yet in this presentation because the financial close, they are the lead arrangers, that the financial close has not been signed. We expect to have in the second quarter next year. But those three entities, Shell, Wärtsilä, and IFC, supported us very well since the beginning. Without them, we wouldn't be here today. With Shell, we signed the LNG sales and purchase agreement. With Wärtsilä, the EPC contract for the power plant. As mentioned, we signed a long-term sales and purchase agreement with Shell after a tender requested by the regulator in El Salvador, CIGET. Although we had a firm proposal with Shell, the regulator wanted to a demonstration that was a very competitive price, because at the end of the day, the cost of the gas is a pass-through. And after a long process, we negotiated, there was a tender, audited, supervised by the regulator. We entered into a long process of discussing the gas contract. And in April this year, we signed this contract with Shell. Wärtsilä, a company founded in 1834, much before the engines existed. It's our supplier for the EPC, engineering, procurement, and construction for the power plant. The power plant is definitely, as we will see, the core of Energía del Pacifico. And that power plant is 19 engines and a steam turbine. And Wärtsilä supported us since the very beginning. Guys in Houston, Sampo Suvisari, Raul Carral, and guys in Finland have been with us at any moment. Something about the project. I mentioned that the core is the power plant. This is a PPA for power and energy, but we will build an important part of the infrastructure required in El Salvador, because there is not a pipeline arriving to the neighborhood of the power plant, and we don't have the possibility to put a connection into a flange, because there is not such a pipeline. We have to bring the gas, LNG, and we will build a maritime infrastructure, and let's say downstream the power plant, another infrastructure we have to build is the transmission line, a 45 kilometers long double circuit. So it's three projects really. In this photograph, we can see the port of Acajutla. The port of Acajutla is all this. This is the existing pier, and this land in blue, it's more than 100,000 square meters surface, has been rented by us for more than 4 years now, and that is the place where the power plant will be built. But besides that, a floating storage and regasification unit to receive storage and regasified gas, a subsea pipeline, and an underground pipeline to reach the power plant. And after the power plant, the 45 kilometers long transmission line. Some features of the power plant. It's a 19 Wärtsilä engines, spark gas, 50 centimeters of the cylinder diameter, and it's in combined cycle because there is a steam turbine. In total 378 megawatts that multiplied by the 94% availability guaranteed by Wärtsilä gives the committed 355 megawatts. Heat rate 7.8, around 43–44% efficiency. And the plant will look like more or less the one that Wärtsilä has built in Dominican Republic. This is just a render of the transmission line from Acajutla to the connecting point. It's a substation at 230 kilovolts in Ahuachapán. That substation is part of CEPAC, the regional international transmission line that crosses all over Central America. And a big challenge, one challenge is the name of this project. The big challenge in the transmission line was that we had to get 260 right-of-ways, 260 parcels. We finished this process successfully a few weeks ago, but it was really hard work to get such amount of right-of-ways. Some milestones in our project, as mentioned, we started thinking about the inception of this was 5 years ago. When we started leasing the area shown in blue, recent, a couple of slides ago, we contracted initially a pre-feasibility study to Tractebel Engineering in Belgium. In late 2012, there was a call for the tender. In 2013, we established an office in Houston to deal with the gas. We had to demonstrate we were professional, we were serious. This is the first LNG to power project in El Salvador, so nobody believed much at the beginning in us. In November, Quantum was awarded the tender, and as mentioned, following the tender rules, we created Energía del Pacifico, signed the PPAs, and had to post a pre-operative bond, almost $33 million, which shows a big commitment shown by the developers. Over the years, we worked very hard in getting some permits, in moving forward with the tender for the LNG, many permits, and also we performed the geotechnical studies, because this is a seismic zone, and all the works onshore and offshore, we devote a lot of time and a lot of resources working that. We got the interconnection approvals from both the National Transmission Company, ETESAL, and the regional entity, a regional operative entity, EOR, and CRIE. But really the big year is this year, in which we finally got approval from the regulator to sign the gas contract, and we signed with Shell in partnership that has been working as part of Energía del Pacifico with a lot of resources for more than 2 years now, was this year finally accepted by the regulator, was allowed to be the majority shareholder, and is now completely incorporated as 85% owner. This year we finished the onshore and offshore geotechnical campaign that started last year. We have gotten the terminal feasibility approvals. We're working very close to the National Congress because we need the approval of marine concession law for the use of the sea, and we have gotten all the technical approvals for the environmental permits for the marine terminal, the power plant, and the transmission line. We only need now the paperwork that has started last week to post the bonds requested for the environmental permit, and it's a question of a few weeks to get the final permits. Some words about about the energy sector. I mentioned the National Board of Energy that develops the policies, for instance, that in the tender we were awarded, heavy fuel oil was banned. CHED is the regulator, UT is the independent system operator, and the distribution companies that, as you can see, 4 out of the 7 distribution companies belong to AES, which represents 74% of our off-takers. Del Sur, EPM, represents another 24%, and the rest are small local discos. Just an overview of the size of this market, 1.5 gigawatts installed, an overview of the electricity consumed in any given year in the order of 18 gigawatts hour, and this shows more or less the idea of the merit order, because you can see the geothermal below, afterwards the hydropower, depending, it's not constant, it depends on the rainy season or dry season, and to meet supply and demand, it's basically today the bunker, the red lines, and we will, Energía del Pacifico will take its participation as part of the red. And this is just an image of the transmission line from Acajutla to Ahuachapán connecting point. Our transmission line will be part of the national transmission system. Couple of comments about the PPA fundamentals. There is a capacity payment as well as for any participant in the market, and there is a payment for the associated energy that is a concept related to the financial idea of the PPAs. Energía del Pacifico will be selling energy regardless of it is dispatched or not by us, and definitely we will dispatch most of the energy we will be selling, but we will have to demonstrate every hour that we are competitive enough to be dispatched. That is a challenge in terms of the take-or-pay contracts signed with the gas, but it's a very good challenge, and it's good for the consumers because it guarantees that the independent system operator is dispatching at every hour the most efficient plant. To have an idea, probably I will try in a minute to explain the fundamentals of this. For those who are not familiar, we can see in the vertical axis power, in the horizontal axis time, let's say 24 hours. So the area in this graph is energy. And let's say this light blue area is the total energy consumed in the country in any given day. So the idea is to draw a line at the level of, this is just a sketch, no? To draw a line at the level of 355 megawatts and to copy the form, same shape of the light blue area, but at the level of the 355, which gives you the the green area, the project associated energy. That is the energy that the project will be selling to the distribution companies, regardless of if that energy is being dispatched or not. The idea is the marginal cost rules. Nobody with a cost at any given hour above the marginal cost of that hour will dispatch, and you have to dispatch if your variable cost is below the marginal cost of that hour. No? So the dispatch is completely ruled by the ISO. And for instance, just an idea, to have an idea, this red line shows our real dispatch. This is, and again, just a sketch. So this area is energy we will be selling but not dispatching in this case, for instance, because someone else with a variable cost below the marginal cost at that time will be dispatching on our behalf. But we will get the monies and we will have to pay that energy to the guy that dispatched on our behalf. A typical financial PPA. On the contrary, let's say at noon, we will not only dispatch the energy under contract, the green area, but also this dark blue area, because the independent system operator will call us to dispatch energy above our contract. That is the spot sales, but it's not a speculative spot. The name is spot because we will be paid for that dark blue energy the marginal cost of the hour. If we are the marginal guy, we will only get paid our cost. It's a very interesting system, very used in Latin America. The LNG demand will vary, you can see in the right axis, around 7 vessels a year, assuming that any vessel brings 3 trillion BTU, and our consumption will be in the order of 20 trillion BTU. It will depend on our real dispatch, on the power plants to be installed in the future in the region, etc. But we will be in the order of 7 vessels a year. This is just to give an idea. For instance, our power plant will consume 500,000 tons per annum, and the potential only in El Salvador is, we consider, 2 million tons per annum, not to mention Guatemala and Honduras, where we can do, in the Pacific side, hub and spoke for small LNG. But those upside business will come definitely, but we are not really focused at this moment because this is time to be concentrated in our power plant. Finally, a few comments on the positive impacts of Energía del Pacifico, the gas. This is natural gas is a game changer and promotes a real diversification of the energy matrix. We will add, in a country with 1.5 gigawatts, we will add firm capacity for near 400 megawatts. We will promote the gasification of the North Triangle of Central America. It means not only for power generation, but for transportation, industrial use. As Varsila knows very well, gas is a perfect match for renewables. The integration of renewables, given a high ramp up of the engines, is a perfect match. For renewables, in El Salvador, there is an increasing use of renewables. There has been a very successful tender, more than one tender, for solar, and we can accommodate perfectly well to work with the independent system operator. There is going to be a strong reduction of emissions. We have no sulfur gas. This point is very interesting. By the tender rules, the company awarded has to invest an amount of money per annum. There is a parameter. In our case, we have already started the investment of more than $500,000 a year in Acajutla city, and this is very good because it allows benefits for the community, even now before we start operation, and reduces people that could be against the project. It reduces the bad thoughts about the project. really, this is a very intelligent measure taken by the government, and is the most important private investment in the history of El Salvador. The total project is in the order of $800 million. Social investments, the inauguration of streets, we paved in Acajutla city with the vice president, Mr. Ortiz. This year, that was last year. This year, we invested in an educational complex. We invested in a completely new sports facilities and restrooms, etc. And it's very good for the community. Back to the project, our commercial operation day. This is a very high-level schedule. Our commercial operation date is expected to be in late 2020, financial close in second quarter next year, and now we need only the final paperwork for the environmental permits and the concession that is moving forward well at the National Congress of El Salvador. And that's all I had to present today about the project. So I'll be glad to receive questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Alejandro, very much for that very comprehensive presentation. There's a lot of questions I have, but first, a couple people have already posed questions. We'll go in order of the questions that received, and I think folks have recognized using the chat function for the questions. So, Alejandro, there's a question from David Lewis about the cost and price savings, and the question is, what will the cost price savings for El Salvador users in kilowatt hour in terms of using LNG? The second piece, or the second part of that question is, will there be benefits from sourcing United States Henry Hub LNG? So a couple of different, one is a very market-specific question, and then the broader natural gas pricing, or LNG pricing, I should say. Alejandro?
I lost you.
Oh.
No, but I could get some of your questions, and I'm reading them.
Yep.
So perfect. Yes, very interesting questions.
So I had asked you first, let's take the one David Lewis posed about the cost benefits in El Salvador, and also more broadly, are you, as the project, taking advantage of the low price reference at United States Henry Hub LNG?
Yes, let's start for the reference. Yes. Yeah. Well, we had two options to price the gas. Henry Hub, everybody assumed that we were going to choose a Henry Hub, but the other option was Brent. And again, because this is a financial PPA, and we will have to compete with the existing power plants that are a heavy fuel oil based, we have to be sure, completely sure, that we will be competitive against the existing power plants. So there is a strong correlation between Brent and heavy fuel oil, but there is not really any correlation between Henry Hub and heavy fuel oil. So to be competitive, to be sure we would be competitive, we had to choose Brent. The final price in dollars per million BTU really doesn't depend. You can be very competitive if your index is Henry Hub or if your index is Brent. It depends on the formula. No? Brent, it's a percentage of Brent, and Henry Hub is not Henry Hub pure. definitely it's Henry Hub plus constant, because you have to add regasification, transport, etc. You will not buy gas at Henry Hub flat. You will pay Henry Hub times a constant plus another constant. In our case, so we got a very competitive pricing, but indexed at banks. That's why, because we have competition, we have to deal with competition, and that's why Brent. Regarding cost, well, our variable cost depends on the Brent. Is definitely the most competitive, and on top of the variable cost, we will be paid that spread or premium that is really the payment for the new investment, because given the way in which the system works, you receive as a variable cost only your real cost, which is fuel and O&M. But on top of that, to repay the new investment, you have to receive that spread. Just as a reference, the value of our spread, this is public information, is below $50 per megawatt hour, is well below almost 50% of the spread quoted by our competitor at the tender. Regarding other, some guy is asking for MOFAT. Well, this is we have several consultants. Yes, we have worked very much with MOFAT. Our relationship with Tractebel was very good, but ended long ago when we moved towards the U.S. part of the world. FSRUs, yes, we are finalizing the selection, moving forward very well. That IFC is the only I'm here myself, sorry. Is the only institution.
You're doing a wonderful job of self-moderating. Thank you.
Sorry. Continue. You continue. Okay, I'm reading the questions.
Go for it.
IFC is the lead arranger. There are other institutions. It's not easy to develop a project, to finance a project in Central America. The first a project this size in Central America is the first project that power in El Salvador. El Salvador has suffered recently a decrease in its credit rating, and there are other multilaterals, but IFC plays a role of lead arranger. We're going to bring gas to South America, Mexico, and Guatemala. Well,
Alejandro, there's just to back up a little bit. So there is a question. I'm not sure if this is something that's publicly available or even fully defined yet, but the question of the sourcing of the LNG, is that something you can comment upon?
Yes, sourcing the contract. When we decided to choose LNG supplier, we went to the big names, and Shell naturally is one of them, and it's a portfolio supplier. Anyhow, as mentioned, we entered into a competition that was awarded to Shell, but they had to compete to be finally the awarded company. And there is a pricing agreed, reference Brent. Sourcing is not necessary from US. Remember that we are in the Pacific, and Shell, for instance, has several sources, potential sources in the Pacific. They can do a lot of swaps or other operations, and there is no specific origin on The only thing is that Shell, as a portfolio supplier, will decide in every vessel where that gas comes from. And we are happy with that.
Okay. So, sorry, I interrupted you. We're beginning to comment about the FSRUs and the potential, or have you considered, or what about FSRUs is the specific question.
What about the FSRU? Yes, this kind of projects tend to be, and you read, if you take a look at the existing articles and literature these days, in developing countries, FSRUs or similar to FSRUs, or barges that regasify, etc., are a very convenient option to avoid the onshore tanks that are time-consuming, and it's better to bring the facility already built. There is a relatively quite liquid market. We are very well advised in that regards. Definitely, as surrounded by Shell and by IFC, there is no room to commit mistakes, and we consider we are not committing any in that regard. And yes, we are having conversations. This is confidential, but we're having conversation with the key players of that world, of the FSRUs, and that is the part that we expect to, the commercial part that we expect to have finished probably in the first quarter next year.
Okay. So there was this other question I think that's interesting, and the supposition is, does the Energía del Pacifico project, or does it take into account, how does it take into account the proposed natural gas pipeline that would be connecting Guatemala and Mexico, with the potential to go beyond Guatemala, so bringing Mexican gas into the Northern Triangle? The questioner here mentions the World Bank support of that project, but comment a little bit about where that may stand and how that fits in vis-a-vis your development model.
Yes, it's interesting. My first time in Central America was exactly 20 years ago. I was still living in Argentina, and my bosses sent me to Guatemala to meet the Minister of Energy there in '97 to discuss about a pipeline, Mexico-Guatemala, that was promoted by CIDA, Canadian Development, something like that, I don't remember exactly. Yes. It was going to be a pipeline, Mexico-Guatemala to El Salvador. That was really my very first time in Central America, 20 years ago. 20 years later, there is no pipeline. I'm not saying that it will take another 20 years, because the world has changed a lot, and Mexico is another country today. There are many things that have moved forward, and probably there is going to be such pipeline. But in parallel, it is true that the LNG market is becoming more liquid every day, so that competes against the pipelines. But the key issue is that we have not only a right, but an obligation to deliver energy, not later than July 2021. To deliver energy, you have to have a project built. To have the project built, you have to have the project finance. You have to have gas. So if you go back, we ask the question directly to some Mexican entities, Pemex,
Great.
And others. But we never receive and even we discussed it with the Salvadorian government, because it's supposed that natural gas by pipeline could be cheaper than LNG, but we really never receive a firm proposal to buy gas from Mexico. So that is a deal breaker to consider gas for our project. In the future, the LNG contract is for 12 years. In the future, if in, let's say, 15 years from now, there is gas available by pipeline, we will turn into that. We will connect to the pipeline, but today we cannot consider that option because it doesn't exist, simply.
Right, right. Well, that's a very interesting, thanks for sharing the personal anecdote, and for sure the pipeline has been a discussion for some time, and it makes a lot of sense for obvious reasons, including Mexico being able to bring natural gas to some of the southern states that don't necessarily have access right now. There's a question about the legal and regulatory environment in El Salvador, and the question is, has El Salvador established laws and regulations for natural gas development, not only for power but other sectors? And you talked about the focus of this project in the near term is the tender that you won for power generation and delivery. But what's the regulatory legal environment for natural gas usage beyond the electric sector in El Salvador?
That is a very interesting point. There is a law of natural gas, a very high level law. There is a reglement, a rule, but it's not completely established, and there are several open parts. And but definitely the experience says that regardless of how well developed the regulatory system is in a country, when the gas arrives via an anchor project as the big power plant, the rest comes because the market will accommodate, the consumers will say, well, there is gas, we want gas. There is not a developed legal framework in El Salvador for the natural gas. For instance, there are no specifications for compressed natural gas for use in cars or for other uses, but we believe that will be developed over time before we start operations, and we see no problem in that. It definitely has to be created, but there are good examples in the world, in Latin America, of how that regulation evolves. So we are aware of that, but we are not focused at this moment in that development, but definitely we will work with the government.
No, it's an interesting point. In Panama, where we had the roundtable, there was a lot of discussion, a little bit different scenario, given the Panama Canal and the potential for bunkering LNG and fuel for maritime transportation, as well as some small industrial uses in the transport sector also. There's a clarification. I have a couple of things I want to ask you. We're almost out of time, but there's a clarification somebody is seeking, Alejandro, if you don't mind, as to the structure of Energía del Pacifico. Could you just quickly revisit that and clarify the structure of the special purpose vehicle company?
Yes. Energía del Pacifico is the project owner. It's a company that today is owned 85% by Invenergy and 15% by Quantum. Originally, it was solely owned by Quantum because Quantum was awarded the tender and had to create that special purpose vehicle at the beginning, completely owned by Quantum, but definitely it was clear since the very beginning that the majority part of the project, that special purpose vehicle, had to be sold to a company with the know-how, the pockets deep enough to take the majority part of this project, and the strategic investor. So after winning the tender, we performed road shows, we had contact with several companies, but finally we decided to go with Invenergy because of the many virtues that Invenergy has to be the majority partner of this project.
And the role of IFC?
IFC, well, these projects are financed in a proportion we are discussing. IFC is a lead arranger. There is a club of lenders. Not only IFC, there are conversations with OPIC, because Invenergy is a US-based company, and export credit agencies from Finland, Finvera, because of the participation of Wärtsilä, and those are basically the kind of lenders, but that is to finance the project. The lenders are not equity holders.
Excellent, thank you.
That discussion is going. It's an ongoing discussion with lenders.
Understood, yeah. So IFC is the arranger, and there could be several other, including export credit agencies in various countries.
Yes, yes.
So one final question, and we're almost out of time. I was very much struck by some of your discussion of the role of natural gas as a clean energy source. We've all talked a lot about how it's a much cleaner burning fuel source than heavy fuel oil. And you had a graphic that showed the displacement that your project will have in terms of bunker in the El Salvador electric matrix. Have you analyzed the emissions reductions impacts, or what are some of the analysis that you've done in terms of that displacement of bunker beginning when the project comes online in the next couple of years? What kind of emissions reductions impact for El Salvador will that have, if you can comment on that?
Yes, I don't have the exact number in mind at this moment, but definitely that fact is one of the issues we have been discussing with environmental authorities. When you develop a project, we talk about the environmental impact. Having the word impact normally a negative sense, but in our case, it's a very positive, because we will deliver energy without that 3% sulfur of the fuel oil. The existing power plants will not disappear. They will maintain some participation, but definitely we will take an important part of the thermal power. In that graph, the red lines in the graph.
Yeah.
But definitely it's not difficult. For instance, we will produce 2.2 million megawatt hours a year, 2.3 million megawatt hours a year as an average, and via the heat rate, the amount of millions BTU per megawatt hour, you can calculate the amount of gas that we will use, that is 20 trillion BTU, and that gas will be replacing the consumption of fuel oil. So the experts, it's very easy for them to calculate the amount of reductions, and that is written and that has been submitted to the environmental authorities. And definitely it's a miscalculation, but it's an impressive. 1/3 of the energy of El Salvador is going to be produced by Energía del Pacifico without contamination, no? Without sulfurs. So it's huge, the impact, the positive impact.
I appreciate the point of the environmental impact being a positive, and so we'll no, absolutely. I was just very curious because of the size and the scale of the project once it comes online for their overall power matrix, what impact it would have on production. We are unfortunately out of time, Alejandro, but I think we were able to cover a lot of ground. Really greatly appreciate your participation, and I know we had you guys participating a couple years ago at a roundtable in El Salvador, so it's great for us to learn of the progress and the developments of your project. We wish you the best going forward in the next several months and years. And I just have on the screen here some upcoming programs. We're going to be quite busy in December at the Institute of the Americas. We'll have a breakfast roundtable discussion in Mexico City on some energy transition, renewable energy issues in Mexico. Another webinar, December 12th, we'll have Raul Garcia, who will present some analysis of the role of state intervention in natural gas in Argentina, case study. And then finally, we'll end the year with a morning program, and in fact, we'll be discussing some of these issues as well in terms of LNG and natural gas, but also U.S.-Mexico energy relations on December 15th in Washington, D.C. So hope you can join us either online again in December or in person. And thanks again to Alejandro Alle. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday, and to those folks in the U.S., happy Thanksgiving. Gobble, gobble.
Thank you.